Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting, brought to you by ElkBros.com, with your hosts Gilbert Ornelas and elk hunting coach Joe Giglia. You want to hunt elk, and they live to hunt elk. Their goal is to share with you what they have learned grinding it out for over 35 seasons, doing what they love. So come on into camp and set a spell. Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunters.
Welcome everybody, I'm Joe Giglia, and this is our InSights edition where we want to learn and talk about all things elk. Today, our special guest and I compare today's elk hunter versus the hunters 20 years ago when it comes to preparedness, knowledge, effectiveness, their ethics, and woodsmanship. But listen, for all you grinders out there, we're going to take it even a step further and give a tip or two along the way for each of those areas. And with us today from Idaho is Michael Batease from the Elk Calling Academy. Evening, Michael. Michael, I got to do that.
Yeah, we're going to start that way. No, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
I wanted to tell you because I've been a coach for 30 some years, and I'm one of those lazy name guys, man. I shortened everybody's name. So I'm trying to make sure I go Michael instead of Mike there. But
I get it. I coached high school baseball for a while, and there was times that I just shouted, "Hey, you." So
So pretty cool. This is awesome. You're in Idaho. I'm in Cimarron, New Mexico. We got a great connection here. I want to thank you for taking the time and being part of this because like I told you before, I'm a fan of what you do. I love your format.
Thank you.
I love the things that you do that are helping so many guys to straighten that curve out a little bit for learning. And I truly believe that what I do, what you do, what so many people out there are doing, the more that these guys and gals can see, can hear, can view, just makes a better experience for all of us. And right now we're needing that.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, anytime I get a chance to sit down and talk about elk hunting, which is something that I'm truly passionate about, you don't have to twist my arm. But I think kind of like you with that coaching background. I mean, when you coach an athlete and you see that athlete succeed,
right,
not only on the field, but off the field, that pride that you get. And same thing with, helping individuals, learn about elk hunting and some of the traditions behind it and the passion behind it. And there's nothing better than when I get a phone call from a student and they're calling you from the mountainside and you can just hear that excitement on their voice because they just arrowed their first bull. And it's almost like you're right there. But also too, it takes you back to when you started that journey. I mean, it takes me back to my first elk hunt and my first successful elk hunt. And so it gives me the opportunity to relive that bit of my past as well. And it's just, it's just so cool that, I have that opportunity to, be able to share this and do that. And I think I get more enjoyment out of their success than my own punch tags.
Yeah, definitely. That, I know exactly what you're talking about. So Michael, for those people that haven't, seen the Elk Calling Academy and don't know about your history and stuff, can you give us a touch on that for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started my elk hunting career in the mid to late 80s over in Eastern Oregon. My stepdad, he wasn't a big game hunter. He was a bird hunter. My grandfather was a big game hunter, but at that time he was too old to get out there. So it was basically just me and some buddies just learning. And in fact, a lot of when I first started archery hunting for elk was completely solo. And that's what, sparked that fire. And then I moved to Idaho in mid 90s, early 90s, 94, 95-ish. And that's when it really took off because I got hooked up with a group of guys that went 7 miles back in the backcountry. And it was that type of place where you went to bed every night and you were listening to 20, 25, 30 bulls just bugling all around you. And I mean, just magical. And that right there, I mean, I was hooked.
Right.
At that point, I just wanted to learn all I could about elk. And the way the Elk Calling Academy came about, I've worked in the hunting industry for, over 15 years now, representing call companies and different manufacturers of, going to sports shows, traveling around, doing seminars all throughout the Northwest and up into Canada. And I've always helped people learn how to call. And in fact, that's one thing I did a lot of times at sports shows when, now it's called Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. Back then it was a bugling bull. And I would be in the booth and somebody would buy a call and I would sit there and work with them, make sure that they walked away and knowing how to at least make a little bit of sound. And 2 years ago, I had archery shop call me and they're like, hey, we had a guy in here asking for some lessons and, he's willing to pay. And I'm like, he doesn't need to pay. What's his name and number? And so I called him and we talked and he's like, I know your time is valuable away from your family. I'm willing to pay. And he goes, just think about what it's worth to you. And I said, okay, I'll get back to you. No sooner had I hung up the phone and walked away and my youngest walks up and says, Dad, I want swimming lessons. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll go find you a teacher. And I took about 3 steps and that light bulb went off.
Oh yeah.
Like, wait a minute. We can pay for guitar lessons, drum lessons, dance lessons, driving lessons, all this stuff. I have 30 years of elk hunting experience and knowledge and calling.
Right.
Man, somebody might find value in that. And so that's when I called the guy back and said, okay, yeah, I'll do one-on-one lessons, $30 per lesson. And then all of a sudden, then it branched out with people. Well, I'd really like to do lessons, but I don't live in the Boise area. I can't drive over to your house. How many people would it take for you to come into our area? And that's when I started looking and found Zoom.
Uh-huh.
And that allowed me the ability to sit down with someone just like you and I are right now and still be able to see what they're doing with their mouth and what they're doing with their tongue and make those adjustments. And so then we added Zoom and now all of a sudden, we have students all the way over to West Virginia and Florida and, all over the US. And so
the world gets a lot smaller, doesn't it?
Oh, it's amazing that, and at first it was just kind of focusing on the calling aspect and kind of some calling tactics. But then I started getting a lot of questions about elk behavior and scouting. And so it's just kind of evolved in the last couple of years and grown to where the academy, I mean, it's Elk Calling Academy is the name, but it really covers everything in regards with elk. I mean, their biology, their behavior, seasonal, but we also get into gear. And, now we have a Patreon page, which is a monthly membership patron, pretty easy to find. It's at ElkCallingAcademy.com. And I started dropping the instructional videos in there because the one thing with the one-on-one lessons, with the people face-to-face here, as soon as they leave my house,
right,
they don't have anything to go back on.
Sure, right.
Zoom was great because I could record it and send it to them, but then they only had access to that recording for a couple of weeks.
So before you go too far, Michael, I want to make sure that that's clear because I heard you talk about your Patreon page and, to a viewer that doesn't know what that is, it's an actual website.
Yes.
Patreon is a website where people can basically have patrons join and pay a subscription amount for some type of service. Correct. So when you say Patreon page, people are going to your Patreon website.
So yes, it's patreon.com/Elk Calling Academy. But the one thing I did is when I first started Elk Calling Academy, I went on and I bought 5 or 6 domains. So, and right now I have ElkCallingAcademy.com that actually just points right to that Patreon page. Okay. So that's usually why I tell people if you just type in ElkCallingAcademy.com, it will take you, right to that page. And it's $15 a month. But I've dropped those instructional videos in there, which are the same videos that I teach in the one-on-one lessons. But the neat thing is as long as As long as you're a paid patron, you have access to that to go back and watch it as many times as you want.
Right.
But we also have e-scouting instructional videos in there. Every other Thursday, we do a live Q&A only for Patreon members. You have to be able to log into that page and be a paid member to see that link, to see that live Q&A.
Right.
And so it's great, interaction. It's a great platform because I get to drop a lot of articles, gear reviews, brand partner deals with, companies that I work closely with that, give discounts to the patron members. And so there definitely are incentives. And, we also have gear giveaways. So who doesn't like winning some free gear?
Well, and I, to your credit as well, because a lot of people, they look at that and they go, oh, so yeah, I got to pay a subscription to learn this stuff. Well, your skill set's number one. Man, try to go do anything and get consulting from anybody for $15 a month. But that's on one side of it. But I want people to understand, I've watched your stuff. I've looked at your Wapiti Wednesdays and that you do when you're doing so much free content for people as well. And what people need to understand is that people like you, like myself, like Corey Jacobson, born and raised, that we love and we're passionate about what we do, and we want people to be successful. So yes, you have that, and you have to pay your bills. You have to pay for those, for those lessons and stuff. And,
yes.
Because of you, I actually started one of those Patreon pages. And basically the only reason I have that is until certain things are in place, you just gotta, you gotta keep the lights on. So
right.
if people really enjoy what you're doing, or they want specific lessons, if they want individual attention, it is such a great format. So I want to applaud that.
Oh, appreciate that. And that's the other thing too, is with the, Patreon page, there's still the ability to do the one-on-one lessons if they want some of that additional one-on-one work. And then again, those patron members get a discount, because typically, it's $30 per lesson, which lasts about an hour. So basically $30 an hour for those one-on-one lessons.
Right.
So they can certainly, still do that. But the thing that I found is those patrons that have gone through those videos, then when they come to me for the one-on-one, we get so much more out of those one-on-ones
because of their background.
Well, because they've already gone through some of those instructional videos that have, some of the basic drills and some of the basic sounds that we can. It's almost, okay, let's go back to the sports analogy. It's like a high school kid coming onto the field to play baseball that has never played baseball before in his life versus somebody else that started in T-ball and has come through Little League. And so he's got those fundamentals. He's got an idea of what's going on, and you can get so much more done with that individual than you can over here.
So in education, we call that scaffolding. Basically building one, we call that building one skill on top of the other, and that's what enhances each level that you go on there. And the thing that I want to put out there as well is that you think about that $15 a month, and there's so many guys that are looking that after they get done paying for their tag, their license, their gas, their travel, man, what a small amount to try to help ensure a little bit of success. So, and my listeners that are out there, I talk to those blue collar guys that are out there, you want to get something for your money. And so if you're going to put that kind of money to come out west, or if you're in New Mexico and you're already, going to go up to the hills, I recommend any of this stuff to you just to help you get a step closer to punching that tag. So I think it's a great format, Michael.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, it's, hunting, it takes a decent amount of money to go out there and hunt and enjoy it. And why not do just a little bit extra. So yeah, like you said, $15 a month, just drive by Starbucks twice.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
2 days during the month, don't stop at Starbucks. And there you go. You got it covered.
Come on, guy. Years ago you were going, they're charging what for coffee? That'll never happen. It'll never fly, right?
Well, and I've had so many students that, have come back and was like, we think you're selling yourself short. You could charge 2, 3, 4 times more than what you are. And I said, okay, you can afford 2, 3, 4 times more, but there's people out there that $15 a month is a stretch.
Sure.
So they are paycheck to paycheck. They are tight.
Sure.
Very, very frugal. And I didn't want to alienate anybody. I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to share, because I mean, you've been out there, you're interacting with a bull and you're calling back and forth. And it's just, there's a lot of times when I'm behind my hunting partners that I just have this huge grin on my face that I'm almost chuckling because it's so much fun.
Right.
And to see back there and you're doing some things and all of a sudden he gives this sound and it's like, you're done. I got you.
And I tell people, look, the big thing about the difference a lot of times between those people that punch their tag and those people that don't, it just comes down to confidence. And when you can do anything to improve that confidence, it's basically your skill sets of knowledge, of understanding that animal behavior, and you need to do anything that you can to do that. And there are so many tools. There's a lot of free content out there. Use all of that. But if you want something specific, take a look at things like this. So our topic today that we're going to talk about, and this is really cool because it gives us a chance to to tap on a lot of different things, is the elk hunters today. Our elk hunters today versus those hunters 20 years ago. When you look at those areas of preparedness, of knowledge, effectiveness, ethics, woodman-ship, we're going to kind of tap on some of those areas. But man, there's in some areas there's great improvement, in some areas there's a little bit of loss. And
yes.
What do you think when you compare hunters today to yesterday in some of those areas? What are some of your thoughts on that?
First off, you touched on it, the amount of free knowledge that's out there to help yourself prepare. I mean, in fact, Wayne Carlton and I were talking about this today. Wayne started, maybe a year or two before me. So, but no, I mean, back then in the mid to late 80s, there was nothing. I mean, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't Outdoor Channel, there wasn't hunting shows, there wasn't, companies producing VHS tapes with hunts. There wasn't even hardly any books. I mean, I think Valerius Geist, who is a Canadian biologist, I don't even think his book came out until 91, 92. And then there was a couple of more that got released in 95, 96. But these books didn't even become popular until the late 90s. So you have, a decade of time when, things were really starting to progress, that the only way you got knowledge was each fall out in the woods and interactions with those elk. And that's one reason why I started keeping a journal. I took a spiral ring notebook to camp with me. And when I got back to camp at night, I just wrote the date on the top, and then I just started writing what the weather was, what the temperature was, what type of activity I saw, what sounds I heard, what I did, what type of responses. And I did that for every day. But then during the winter, I'd go back and read through those. And what's really cool is you read those, and then everything replays through your mind again, and it's just fresh. Well, you start doing that 3, 4, 5 years, and you've got 10 to 15 to 20 pages per year. I mean,
database.
You have 1,000 pages of information to start reading through. And so yeah, the access to information now versus back then is just tremendous. And also the advancements in some of the gear.
Yeah. I mean, you think back then, you're going to come out west and you're going to go into some mountains. Well, if you don't know how to read a topo map, you're really out of luck. It's foot on the ground, and
Absolutely.
no GPS.
Nope.
And we were talking about that just the other day with Trent from Born and Raised. He was saying, guys coming out here, the only word he could have is basically there's got to be a fear,
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I talk about that all the time, because even with, the online mapping systems now, and I hear this from a lot of people that, they're like, okay, we're going out to Colorado for a 10-day hunt and blah, blah, blah. And I talked to them after the hunt and I'm like, well, how did it go? And I would always hear the same thing. Holy cow, that country was a lot bigger than what I was expecting. It was a lot more rugged than what I was prepared for. It's one of those things that, and that's another thing that I try to do now when talking to people. I love, people with positive outlooks and ambitions. But honestly, when I hear from somebody that's coming from back east and they're like, yeah, we're going out west, there's 4 of us for a 10-day hunt. We're going to go 9 miles back in and we're going to kill 4 bulls. And I kind of chuckle and said, I love your optimism, but let me kind of paint reality for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and at first they don't like to hear the reality, but a lot of times I get that follow-up phone call that was like, wish we would have listened to you because you nailed it on the head. So
yeah. So even if you do get 9 miles in, and even if you do kill those 4 bulls, the experience of getting those 4 bulls out 9 miles, that's one to remember.
Exactly. So, but the other thing on the flip side, like, you said there's been some good advancements in the 20 years, but there's also been, some regression. And
right.
You kind of mentioned ethics. And I think that's one thing. Now, ethics, it's up to each of us to have our own ethics and develop that level of ethics. But I got into archery to see how close to animals I could get. So, right. and I think that is a skill set to get that animal close. And I'm seeing more and more and more where there's people that are, talking and saying, yeah, I took an 87-yard shot on an elk, or I took a 92-yard shot on a deer. And I understand wholeheartedly the skill set that it takes to execute a shot at that distance with a bow.
Right.
But we are still dealing with a wild animal that's unpredictable.
Correct.
That elk take one step at that distance, and now all of a sudden this could be day 1 of your 10-day hunt.
Yep.
You're in for 9 more days of pure misery.
Absolutely, man. And, I think that's one of the things, though, we were talking about ethics, that the other thing we talked about was effectiveness. And so as the equipment has become more effective, which it has,
mm-hmm.
that kind of lends itself to some of those longer distance shots. And so now each and every one of us have to deal with that ethics question. We have to know what our skill set is so that we can actually stay within ourselves.
Yes. And in fact, this past Wednesday on Wapiti Wednesday Q&A, I had an individual ask me, what's the farthest shot you would take on an elk? And still to this day, to me, it's 40 yards.
Right.
I will not take the first shot on an elk past 40 yards. Too many things that can happen. Now, if I already have an arrow in and I'm tracking that animal and I want to do a follow-up,
right,
then by all means, I would take a longer shot. But also to me, I kind of put it with me that, yes, it takes a skill set to execute that longer shot.
Right.
But what about the level of skill that it takes to get that animal even closer to get that animal to 18 yards, 12 yards.
Well, see, that's where, a lot of people, when they talk about this whole thing about trophy hunting, about the size of the rack. Now, for me, like I said, I always go out and I want to bring an animal home. So there's a lot of times that it does not matter what's on top of it. Do we all, do we want to kill a nice big bull? That's awesome. In fact, when we think about that, to take a mature bull is an incredible challenge. The reason we get a lot of those smaller branch bulls and those satellite bulls is because they're just not as bright. So we're kind of taking advantage of their lack of skill sets, where that mature bull, if you really want to have a challenge, then to say, hey, I'm holding out and I'm going after and I'm going to bring in that mature bull. Well, my hat's off to you, because, just like you said, that challenge of getting that close, or that challenge of, taking that monarch who is so intelligent is, that's a heck of a challenge there.
It is. And, really the definition of trophy varies from person to person.
Sure it does.
And I mean, to go out with a bow and arrow and to harvest an animal is a feat in itself. And the trophy, and I'm a lot like you. I mean, in our house, all we eat is wild game. And for me, it's not that I look at an animal and go, okay, is he a trophy? Do I want to take him or not? Right. For me, it's if something cool happens in the hunt that's kind of unique or this or that, I'm going to harvest that animal. And it doesn't matter if it's a spindly 3x4 raghorn or what. It's just there was something unique about that hunt that I want to remember that journey. I want to remember that experience. And in fact, I have a rack over here on my wall from Montana that is a small little 5x5 that's probably barely 200 inches, if that. But he has dried velvet on his antler.
Right.
So that's the first and only bull that I've ever seen with shards of dried velvet running around. And this was the second week of October. So, I mean, that's something that's unique. And I was in this old burn. There was a dozen bulls bugling, and he was coming in single file with 4 or 5 other raghorns. That, I mean, I'm just watching this whole thing unfold, and I'm like, wow, that's really, really cool. And then as soon as that bull got close enough and I saw that dried velvet, and I'm like, you're coming home with me. It's done. I'm going to remember this burnt basin, everything that's going on about this day because of that uniqueness. So,
right. So do you think, I mean, you take a look, when we talk about effectiveness, effectiveness is basically, that individual accomplishing a task at hand.
Right.
And, I think back to, guys 20 years ago that were getting it done with the equipment and the styles. And like you said, some of the first way I ever hunted elk was basically, I mean, this nose wasn't, it wasn't this size for nothing, man. I mean, I would basically walk crosswind, still hunt, walk crosswind till I smelled them, and then hunt into the wind, and my first diaphragm call was actually a turkey call, that because they weren't putting out elk reeds at the time. So were we just as effective then as we are now, or do you think that it's more effective to this day? I think that they're, to a certain extent, there's still a high level of effectiveness, but it's still that effectiveness and consistency from year to year, I still think is kind of a small group like it was, back then. The early days, the pioneers, like you talked about, the turkey reed, which is where the elk reed, developed, and, the forefathers that, Larry D. Jones and Wayne Carlton, Rocky Jacobson, and, Will Primos, and what these guys did for
bringing elk calls to the market that opened up a whole other avenue for hunting. I mean, my first elk call was something that my uncle had made out of an old tin pillbox case and a condom. So, and rubber bands. And, when I told him I was going elk hunting for the first time, he handed that to me, and I was like, wait a minute, I need to change out this latex. And he opens up the package right in front of me, and I'm like, there's no way in heck I'm sticking that anywhere near my mouth to produce an elk sound. He's like, no, just trust me on this. And yeah, my first elk hunt lasted a total of 42 minutes before I had an elk on the ground.
Wow.
All because of that pillbox and condom.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah.
And
I got pulling out a condom saying, trust me. Yeah. That's a whole different.
Yeah. Just relax and trust me. I know what I'm doing here. But no. And I remember going back to him and going, you need to make these, you need to make these to sell them. And he's like, no, this is our family secret. You're not even going to show this to anybody. And then I think a couple of years later, ELK had the Cow Talk, which is basically kind of the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then, diaphragms came along, and I remember the first time sticking an elk diaphragm in my mouth, and I think I gagged and spit it on the seat next to me in the truck. And I don't know if you've ever read the back of an elk package, an elk diaphragm package. I'm a typical guy. I just pull it out of the package and pop it in the mouth, and I'll figure this out.
Right.
And I think once I got done finally reading the back of that card, I think I was more confused than I was before I read it. So,
well, that's I don't know if you've seen any of the Elk Bros, but my hunting partner for 37 years, we're married to sisters. His name's Leroy Chavez, and we all call him Chav. And Chav's been following my heels for 37 years. And, he went on that venture to start calling. He never had to because he had me. And so he never worried about it. But when he decided to start learning that, honest to gosh, the first time he pulled out one, he did not know which direction it went. And I can imagine a lot of people in that same, scenario. So, thank goodness for today, where you can get online, where you can watch YouTube videos and things like that, so that the learning curve gets straightened out some.
Well, and not only that, but the advancements. Like I said, elk diaphragm reeds kind of evolved from turkey reeds, which were a conventional reed. They looked the same on the top as they did on the bottom. And then the confusing is you would have some companies that would build them tab up, and then you would have other companies that build them tab down.
Right.
And you almost had to mark each one so that you knew exactly which the top was. But the other cool thing about those conventionals is the thing that I found is if you put them in one way, they would produce a certain set of sounds. But if you take them out and flip them over, you could almost produce a second set of sounds that would have just a little bit different pitch. So it's almost like you had two diaphragms in one.
Right. Yeah. One of my early techniques was it's a setup that I call putting on a show. And the first time I ever brought in a big herd bull and pulled him off was I actually laid out 3 different diaphragms on my lap and started sounding like, basically putting in what we would call, that breeding sequence, I guess you would call it. And I call it kind of my tea kettle sequence, when you put water on and you're trying to turn up the heat, and it starts out cold and sounded like 3 different bulls in 3 different directions, smaller bull, a little bit more mature, and then a herd bull, and had them coming in, kept swapping out reeds coming into each other until it escalated. And by not calling to that herd bull, by making him think that there was another herd bull with a hot cow and these other bulls coming in, here he comes. And that was my first light bulb, because I actually did that out of frustration, because I had been with this bull since I got on him at 3 a.m. in the moon, traveled 5 miles with the herd, things had busted up and gone different ways, and they were heading out, and I finally just got ticked, went running down a hill, breaking everything I could, and sat down and put on that sequence, and here they came, so, yeah, if you can't go to their party, create your own, right?
Create your own. Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, and also too, kind of the advancements that these call manufacturers have made over the years in materials and fine tuning the craft and learning. And I really, really think that a lot of these reeds that are being produced now are they're so much more user friendly that, there's definitely, and now with different sizes too, you have narrow frames and medium frames and wide frames. And so you can really, really find a reed that, really fits the roof of your mouth, fits your palate, so that you get a really good seal. And I think people have the ability to learn much faster because they're not having to fight. It's not that cookie cutter, all the reeds are one size and you're going to bend the heck out of them or this or that, or get out the scissors and trim to force that thing to fit. You can go around to these different manufacturers and grab different reeds. And in fact, that's one thing that I teach a lot with, brand new callers is, there's 3 reeds that I typically recommend from 3 different companies because they are 3 different sizes.
Right.
And the people can immediately
get a sound,
what's going to fit them the best. And and that's the thing that I think too, one of the things that I think have kind of seen change is the level of patience.
Right.
20 years ago, the level of patience was much, much higher, where now today it's instant gratification.
Definitely.
You push a button, the TV turns on, and you have 258 channels at your disposal. You walk in the kitchen, you grab something, you pop it in the microwave, and you have something to eat in a minute and a half. Okay, 20 years ago, not so much. We had 3 channels, and microwaves really weren't a whole huge, big, popular thing. So
I really think one of those things that changed that for people so they could get that instant gratification, when they started putting the palate plate in, and then people started to dome that on the top so that it kind of fit into a mouth more snug, like Corey and Rocky Mountain Calls with their dome on that make it so much easier for people to get a good fit and to get a good sound out of it. And I think those advancements have really done a lot for the calls.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The advancements, in materials too. And just the longevity of some of them too. And unfortunately, that's one question I get asked a ton, how long should a reed last? And there's so many variables that are involved because, the acids in our latex really break down the latex. And some people have, higher levels of acids. And, are you taking
leave them on their dashboard,
throwing it on the dash of the truck? How are you treating this thing? And
and they don't understand what heat does to the latex, right?
No, but I also hear from so many people that are like, I can't find a reed that will last more than 2 or 3 days to my aggressive bugling from sunup to sundown. I'm like, well, what reed are you using? And most of the time I'm finding that they're using a single light latex.
Right. And they're cranking on it. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you're an aggressive heavy type caller. You need at least a double to have that rigidity that can put up to that abuse. And again, this is where I kind of talk about that instant gratification, because their first response all of a sudden is, well, yeah, but when I take that double out of the package, it doesn't give me the cow sounds that I have to produce. I have to call on it for a while before it will do what I want it to.
Right.
Yes, but guess what? If you pull it out of the package and rip 20 or 30 good hard bugles on it, it will then cow call the way you want, and then it will last a lot longer than that one that will do everything. And I see that all the time.
Well, it even works in the other direction too, because there's some of those single latexes that somebody wants to do a cow call with, and they throw it in, and some of them just have to be broke in a little bit. I mean, sometimes it doesn't hurt to scream on them a little bit so that they soften up and then get a better sweet sounding cow call off of it. You got to
that's
tune
those,
them.
yeah, that's those heavier latexes.
Right.
But again, I see that all the time, and I've seen this over the years at shows where, you know, people will walk up and they'll buy a reed, they'll take it out of the package, they'll pop it, and they'll try to do something, and immediately, if it doesn't produce that perfect cow sound, they take it out and they throw it down and go, "This thing's garbage," and they walk away.
Yeah, it's like throwing away a $7 bill, right?
Well, and like I said, had they just because that's what any reed, especially if I know that it's a heavier latex, the first thing I'm going to do on those is rip bugles on it first to get that reed to settle in the pocket. Then I'm going to go into the cow sounds.
Right.
But that same person that just tried the cow sound once, take it out, throw it away, go, "This is garbage," had they ripped those good hard bugles to get it to settle in, that may have been the best reed that they have ever used, or could do anything they wanted to it, but they just didn't give it the time.
Yeah, I think a lot of those people never had a son or a daughter that was in music class. You know, I mean,
the progression of the student musician.
Oh man, because my daughter, you know, when she first started playing that, you know, the clarinet and trying to get all that noise out there, oh my gosh, how horrible do they sound before they start making beautiful music? And you know, it's just learning about proper placement. It's about learning about proper volume of air. And you know, if I was to recommend to a newbie out there, and like you said before, they come in different sizes, you know, and when we say sizes, we're talking about the distance between the horseshoe where the latex is. You know, you have that 1/2 inch, you have that 5/8 inch. That used to be the only frames that were made, were those 1/2 and 5/8, weren't they? I mean, you said there's 3 sizes, but
early on they used to be 1 inch. They followed the turkey at that 1 inch, 3/4.
Yeah, and that 1 inch is really tough because you got to do a lot of bending with it if you have a small mouth. And
absolutely.
And so what I mean by that is, you know, the wire frame, you'd have to bend that down a little bit so that you could get it to fit in your pallet. But, you know, I try to tell those guys that are coming out, if you have never tried one before, get that 1/2 inch, put that in there. It's going to fit, and you're going to get a noise out of it, which, like you said, because of the gratification, we want them to make a sound and then start working with that from there.
And what I teach is find the widest frame that you can that will fit in your palate between your teeth, because a lot of people think that you need to fit the frame, the tape, everything up in between your teeth.
Oh, I see. Yeah, right.
No, the tape is going to do it anyways, which is going to help. So, but by finding the widest frame that you can, it actually gives you more latex area to control and to play. And because when you start going, you know, the real narrow reeds, now all of a sudden the amount of latex that you have to work with narrows also. So you have to be really, you know, fine with what part of the tongue, you know, you're really flexing. And so I've personally found with beginners, getting them on those little wider ones, they actually have a little better time with sealing. And then, you know, once they advance a little bit, okay, yeah, now you can play. But for some people, no, they have to go those narrow frames because they have those narrow palates.
Right. And they just feel like they have a ball in their mouth, you know, when they get too wide on there.
The gag reflex. Yes.
So, you know, when we talked about the effectiveness, we've done that, you know, woodsmanship, you know, that's kind of the area. GPSs are phenomenal. They have totally changed the game. And even more so than that, cell phones have totally changed the game because, you know, like I tell my grinders out there, I call my blue collar grinders out there, you don't have to spend $400 or $500 on a GPS these days because everybody has one in their pocket. You know, you can do a subscription for $30 at Onyx and you're off and running. And you know, you've got a big screen on your phone, but man, have they changed the game. You can be totally fearless when you're chasing out. However, Michael, what happens to these people that, man, that something happens to that GPS?
As soon as technology dies and they don't have the technology to fall back on, they're lost. They don't know what to do. And yeah, the woodsmanship skills and, I mean, tracking and reading terrain and all these different things, I think is really a lost art. But, you know, also too, you know, paying attention to shadows, paying attention to how high the sun is in the sky, you know, using your fingers to, you know, do the 15-minute deal, you know, to figure out how much daylight you have left. But also, you know, navigating.
So clarify that for them, because you said fingers for the 15-minute deal. That went over a lot of people's heads.
So it's kind of an old way of, so when the sun is setting in the evening, and if you basically set your bottom on the horizon, and so like right now, if the sun is touching my top finger, I know that I have about an hour of daylight left before that sun hits the bottom. And so maybe I have to go this and I can stack 2 more fingers. Okay, I have an hour and a half. So, or, ooh, I have 45 minutes. Oh, I have 30 minutes. I need to get moving.
Right.
So it's just one of those things that, yeah, didn't have, man, how much daylight do we have left? How much time do we have left? Well, yeah, you can look at your clock, you know, your watch, and go, okay, it's 4:30, but okay, well, what time is the sun scheduled to set that day? Or you know, this
exactly.
or that.
Yeah.
So, and
you're in the mountains, that time that is set to go down for somebody else does not count for you because of the mountains.
No, exactly. And, you know, that's one thing that having conversations, you know, with my grandfather, I remember one time he was talking to me about, you know, the side of the tree that moss grows on. And he was explaining the cool side of the mountain versus the hot side of the mountain. And it went over my head, but until I was actually out there, and then I've got him, you know, in my head, and all of a sudden I'm looking around and going, oh, okay. Yeah, when I am on the south-facing slopes of the mountain, it is hot, you know, because of where we were at compared to the equator and where the sun is, you know, how that heat is beating on that southern. But as soon as I roll around that hill, and now I'm getting into the north and northeastern facing side where those afternoon shadows are really hitting, man, it immediately is 10 to 15 degrees cooler. And now you get a little creek in there, and it seems even cooler yet too. And okay, survival mode, you know,
right.
I know I headed south from town, so if I have to get back, or south from my truck, so I know I have to go north. I know there's a road
north of here.
So then understanding the south side of the mountain versus the north side, and using the shadows and all that, you can really help yourself navigate, or just taking that time to, you know, pay attention to landmarks. And that's one thing that I teach a lot with people is when you're out locating elk and you get a response, pick a landmark.
Sure.
You know, whether it's a rock outcropping or a great big old dead snag or something.
Well, and look at those shadows immediately. You know, if you hear that animal off in front of you, you look at those tree shadows, if they're pointing directly off to your right, man, you know, you can move with those shadows directly off to your right there. And depending on whatever time of day is, now you know where you're east-west, you know you're hitting north or south. But using those shadows on those trees and paying attention to that. And I try to tell people, do not become a passenger when you're out in the woods. Don't, you know, take a look at your GPS and start heading a direction without still hunting where you are looking behind you, looking at your back trail, looking all around. Don't be a passenger. Notice what type of area you're in. Look at the vegetation. You know, just like what you were saying, it's critical to that woodsmanship, because if something does happen, you still have other abilities.
You know, also too, when you're starting at lower elevation and working towards higher elevation and you're looking up, how it looks. But as soon as you gain some elevation, you turn around and look back down, how it looks so much different.
Right.
Man, now all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, when I was down below looking up, I couldn't see 30 yards.
Right.
Now I'm 500 yards up here and I can see all the way to the bottom. What the heck? This is crazy.
Right.
You know, but also too, yeah, you're exactly right, where, you know, that's one of those things that always constantly looking around, because there's always little features that then all of a sudden you start recognizing. So if you do, I always joke that I've never been lost. I was turned around for 4.5 hours once, but I was never lost. I was only turned around.
Hey man, if you got back, you weren't lost.
But it was one of those things where, you know, now all of a sudden I got to something that I started recognizing small little tiny things. And it's like, okay, I've been here. Now, when I was here before, was this little thing, was it on my left or was it on my right?
Right.
So, you know, so then little things like that help reorient yourself and get you out of a bad situation.
Right, most definitely. I want to circle back a little bit, and and when we talk about, you know, we talked about calling elk earlier. What do you think? And I know you know this, man, because with all the questions and answers you've had on your live show, it has to happen all the time. What are some of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to calling elk?
Oh, okay.
Here we go, right?
Yes. So, okay, number one that I've heard this for years is somebody will say, oh, I never bugle. If you bugle in my area, elk just run the other way. and so my first response typically is go, okay, I have a question for you. So you say if there's any bugling in your area, elk run the other way. Yes. So you are talking about a herd animal that is extremely social. So if this social herd animal runs every time they hear a bugle, how do they ever herd up? How do they ever repopulate and breed and all this? And then that'll kind of get them thinking, and they'll be like, well, just from our experience. And I'm like, okay, tell me your experience. And usually a lot of times what it is they're working up, it's already light. They threw out a bugle. They got a response from a bull farther up in the canyon. They kind of started working that way. They bugle again. But now the next time the bull responds and he's 300 yards deeper in the canyon. And they're like, oh, that bull's just running from us. No, he's not. Basically, he started in the dark down where you are. He has a place he's heading to, which is his bedding area. And he wants to get to that bedding area at a certain time of day. So he's using the thermals in his nose to check everything in front of him. And he's going to time it so that when he gets to the bedding area, those thermals change and he's able to smell his back trail. If he doesn't smell anything following him, then they're just going to calm down in bed. The fact that he is bugling back to you, he's acknowledging that he heard you. And he's just basically saying, we're right here. We're heading this direction. Come with us if you want.
Exactly.
But then the other thing, I'll take it a step further and go, well, what type of bugle did he do? And normally people have that deer in the headlights look of, what do you mean? Right. I mean, a bugle is a bugle. What do you mean? What kind of bugle? Well, was he doing a location bugle? Was he doing a display bugle? Was he challenging another bull around? What type of bugle did he do? And again, they'll be like, well, what do you mean they have different bugles?
That's that knowledge thing.
It is. And that's another advancement from 20 years ago with the studies that have been done on the vocalizations. But, you know, and I'll tell them, I said, okay, in the human language, in English, we can say the same word, but attach different emotions to it. And because of the different emotions that we attach to that same word, it gives it almost a different meaning because of the emotion that's attached. Same thing with elk vocalizations. You can attach different emotions or different things onto that same sound and give it a different meaning. So only difference between a lip ball and a location bugle is the lip ball has that growly buzzing of the lips. It's adding some emotion into it that just is giving it a different meaning.
Screaming some anger.
Yeah, getting some aggression in there. So yes, the bugling in my area, elk run the other way. Because every time I hear that in my head, I just picture elk just scattering, running around the hills, every which way. And so another huge myth is elk are call shy. You can't call to them like you could, back in the day. They're just, well, okay. So again, a social herd animal that is reactive. They react to their environment. They react to what's going on around them. They react to everything. So again, call shy. Have a great story. So a few years back, I was calling for one of my hunting partners. It was an evening hunt, and we got multiple bulls going, and right there at last light had two bulls come in, and I was back behind him working. I heard his bow go off. I heard the hit. And so, I continued to call for a little bit, and then I, eased up there and I said, okay, where was he? Had him point out everywhere. Where did he disappear to? And this bull dove into some really, really thick brush, and we got right to the edge. Mm-hmm. And it was already way too dark. It was going to be a really, really dark night. And I said, we're going to be cold enough tonight. It's going to get, 33, 32 degrees. Let's just come back in the morning and we'll pick up the blood trail and get after him. And we got in there the next day, and right off the get-go where that bull, one tiny little pin drop of blood. Mm-hmm. And we started heading down, and all of a sudden, of course, that path branches off, and there's elk tracks, all over through there. And we never, ever found another speck of blood. I mean, we spent a good 6-7 hours combing that. And we followed one trail that popped up over the top, and there was a little basin in the back. And I hear this bugle, and I'm like, that's your bull. And all of a sudden he pops out, and sure enough, it was the same bull, still just screaming, running around. It's like, okay, he's fine. So we backed out, waited 2 days, and then went back in for a morning hunt. And I had one of my other hunting partners with me. And it was kind of funny because we, parked the truck. It was still a little dark. We were sitting there drinking coffee, and I hear this noise. And so I roll down the little window a little bit, and it's Jurassic Park. There is just multiple bulls, cows and calves. And I told him, I said, well, good news is the elk are still here. Bad news is they're only about 60 yards from the truck right now. They're just barely starting to work their way up. We got out of the truck, worked over there. Once it was light enough that he could see his pins, and I started calling. And after about 15, 20 minutes, I hear his bow go off. So again, I keep calling to kind of calm that animal down. And about 3 minutes later, I hear his bow go off again. And I'm like, okay, did he miss on the first one? Or because mind you, I'm back calling. I can't see what's going on up there. I'm just reacting on what I'm hearing. And so I get up to him and I said, did you shoot twice? And he goes, it was awesome. He goes, we got set up. Those bulls were screaming, and, you started going through your routine. And I saw this one bull in the back just stop and turn. And it was so awesome to watch him lay his head back and scream at you. And then he came trotting right down the trail and stopped right there. And I zipped the first arrow through him, and he turned and ran back. And you bugled perfectly because he stopped, stood there for a little bit looking around, and then came back into that exact same spot. And I got a second arrow in him. And I'm like, perfect.
Sure.
So we wait a little bit, we track the bull, find him, and start breaking him down. And as soon as I peeled the hide on the right side, right in line with his ribs, was the arrow from my first hunting partner.
Wow.
So this is a bull that I called in 3 times and got shot 3 times in a 3-day period. So if there was ever an elk that was going to be call shy,
right,
you would think it was him.
Right.
So it's not that elk are call shy. It's that there's people that don't understand elk vocalizations or elk situations, and what they're doing does not fit the surrounding. The story that they're telling doesn't fit, or they're being way too aggressive.
They have an immature bull that's not that interesting. He just wants to pal around, and you're screaming at him like,
exactly.
I'm going to kick your butt. So he's not going to hang around.
No, you have that guy that, that bull that you do a sound and he's, ooh, and then most people just, and screaming at him. So, and I've talked to several people that are like, well, yeah, but that's how I hunt. And I said, great. I said, do you ever go to barbecues or gatherings or this or that? And he goes, yeah. I said, okay, next time you're there, walk in, say hi to everybody, wait 5 minutes, and then shout F off at the top of your lungs to everybody.
Yeah.
He goes, well, nobody would want to talk to me. I said, well, that's what you're doing in the Elkwood, so why not do it in real life too? So
right. And you can do that, and you might find one of them that says, I'm your huckleberry, but that's going to be 1 out of the 10 that you come across. So
right.
You got to find somebody that's escalated like that. And I've always believed, that if you match their
intensity,
yep. You can even, I tell guys, if you're not sure how to respond, mimic,
yes.
because then you're staying with their intensity. And as they start to go up, you're going to go up. So
you're never going to intimidate them. But I think also part of it where people think that, elk are call shy is because we are so tuned that the only sound that we're listening for is the high pitch of a bugle.
Right.
Okay, we're not listening for the low audible of huffs and grunts. We're not listening for the low audible of raking. We're not listening for the sound of hooves. Because I don't know how many people that I run into that, on the mountainside, how are you guys doing? We haven't gotten a response all day.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything.
Okay,
right.
You haven't gotten a response.
Right.
Now, do you mean you haven't gotten a response or you haven't heard a bugle? Well, yeah, a bugle, a response. Well, okay, raking is a response.
Sure.
Huffing and growls are a response. Coming to you is a response. There is more to a response than just a bugle.
And that's a huge misconception. And I think that's something we got to reiterate is that, a lot of people go out there, they've gotten their diaphragm call, they've learned to, call a beautiful bugle, and they think that the only thing supposed to happen is another bull bugling back at them. And, if that's not working for you, don't keep trying to cram that square peg in a round hole. Listen for other types of elk sounds. Look for other types of elk sign. Change up a little bit because they're out there. If you're seeing fresh sign, they are there and they are vocalizing. You just got to understand what they're doing and what they're saying.
Yeah, the time of year, the stage of the rut, what's happening
exactly.
in each. And it is all that, knowledge and understanding elk vocalizations. I think that's one thing that really leads to, our success. And one of the keys is because we understand what's going on in the situation based on what we're hearing from the vocalizations.
Right.
And just like when you're engaged working a bull, you're reading his responses. And basically the ability to tailor, because there's not just this cookie cutter, one approach, one strategy that works for every single elk.
Sure.
There's multiple strategies out there, and really honestly throughout a season, you're going to hit them all. And you may even hit them all within one interaction of a bull based on what he's doing. But I think so many people that if they just took the time to understand a little bit more, I think they would really see their level of success go up exponentially.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that have had bulls within 50 yards of them and have never seen them because the whole time they were waiting for an animal that walked in silently to sound off, instead of using their eyes and listening for other sounds, listening for hooves and breaking and stuff. So
I think part of it too goes to that impatience. I mean, I remember early on, I was impatient several times, and like you talked about, paying attention to the sign. You see some of that fresh sign, you set up, you start calling, and then, man, 20 minutes has gone by. No elk has come in. Come on, let's go move to a different spot. You get up and you start walking, and you walk 100 yards, and bang, there's a bull on the same trail that he was actually coming to you. So
sure. Yeah.
Now, another big myth, and you and I kind of touched on this a little bit before we started, was the estrus sound, the sound that the cow gives when she's in estrus and she's ready to breed.
Right.
There's been two terms that have really been associated with this over the years. One was a hyper hot. And honestly, the term hyper hot actually was developed by a call manufacturer back in the late 90s that basically coined this term as a marketing ploy to sell more calls. And honestly, what people think that the hyper hot is this cow that's just and in reality, it's a series of individual sounds that are strung together is what it is actually. It's not a sound by itself. It's multiple sounds. And the analogy that I always give is in the movie National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Chevy Chase, when he goes on his tirade, he's multiple words just linked one right after the other. Now, he didn't invent a new word there. He just said multiple words that strung together to form a very emotional phrase. And that's basically what a cow is doing with this hyper hot. It's a series of sounds. Now, the other one is the Estrus Buzz or the buzz mew. This is the sound that the cow gives when she's ready to breed. The only problem with that is I've heard cows do that exact buzz mew in January. I've heard them do it in June. And to me personally, I think it is more of a demanding sound because when that cow releases her pheromones in the air that the bull is cluing into that she's ready to breed, it also creates a huge herd dynamic excitement that there is a ton of activity, multiple bulls bugling, cows and calves mewing and chirping. It is loud. And in fact, I have 20 minutes of video footage of a herd in Colorado in this exact same situation. And all of a sudden that cow will break out into that buzz mew as a way of demanding that bull. She has to do a sound to separate herself from all the other sounds out there.
Right.
And that's what this sound is. But like I said, I've also seen cows do it in June when they've gotten separated from the other group and they're doing lost mews and they're doing assembly mews and regathering mews and nobody is responding. And all of a sudden they're going to break into that buzz mew that it's basically saying, answer me now, pay attention to me now.
Well, that's like a lot of people think that the bull determines where the herd goes.
No.
And
why is the bull at the back of the herd then?
Yeah, exactly. So it's that lead cow, and the one that's generally going to bust you, the smart one. But yeah, he's pretty much going wherever they're going to take him.
Exactly, because again, that's kind of that knowledge. And here's a little free tidbit we'll throw out for people. The reason that the bull is usually typically at the back of the group is one, when he's back there, because they're typically moving with the wind
into the wind.
Right. So he's at the back of the herd. So that wind is going across all of his cows in front of him.
He's scent
checking every single cow that's in front of him.
Right.
But also, too, he has the ability that he doesn't have to worry about any other smaller bulls coming up from the rear and snagging a cow and try to hook that cow and take him with him up in the front. So that's
because they're actually a couple hundred yards off scent checking as well.
Yes.
I think another misconception is that a herd bull keeps his herd together and he's the only one that breeds his cows. And that's not the case. There's other mature bulls that are waiting in the wings when he's not able to breed one of those cows because those cows are in estrus for, they're what, 12 to 14 hours,
12
something
to
like
14 hours. Yeah. So if he just got done breeding one, he has a recovery time. And if there's another one at that same stage, you're exactly right. So, and that's why the breeding sequence is so effective when setting up and calling, because you're producing sounds that are synonymous with the rut that the bulls only do during September, and other bulls. And the other thing about the breeding sequence is it attracts breeding age bulls, your more dominant older bulls. But they recognize those sounds. So yeah, you're exactly right. They can easily swoop in and, breed that cow because the herd bull is recovering from the other. And plus, he's going to dog that one cow until she's done. So
I've actually been, how when you're working a group and you manage to do that magical move where you get between a bull and his cows and you're like, wow, this is over. This is aces. And have another bull start screaming on the other side with a display bugle and some other bulls lighten up to him, where all of a sudden this bull turned and took off from 10 cows that he's with to go to elsewhere. And you're going, what the heck is going on? Well, he's behind the herd. He doesn't have any cows that are in estrus at that time. And now he hears those other sounds that you're talking about taking place that tells him, whoa, man, there's a hot cow over in this other area.
Yep. I want a shot at breeding her.
Right,
None of my ladies are ready. I'm going to go to try to get that one.
Yeah. And tell me that doesn't leave you shaking your head, though, as a hunter, because if you don't understand what is happening in that sequence, you're like, what the heck just happened there, man?
Right. Well, and again, other sounds, a lot of times like a bull doing a roundup bugle to his cows, right. or you got in on a herd and you did a couple of cow sounds and this bull does this roundup bugle. Well, because of the sounds that are included in that roundup bugle, a lot of people take it as, ooh, I'm busted. That bull is now warning everybody and he's getting ready to go. No, he's actually basically acknowledging that you're a cow and he's basically telling you, come on over.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
So again, it's all that knowledge and understanding the vocalizations and understanding what's going on around you, but also too is being aware of your surroundings. I mean,
matching to the environment.
Yes. We've been out there on those days where it's just a stone cold quiet day. I mean, no birds are singing, no squirrels are chirping. I mean, it's just eerily quiet. And I've seen and listened to people that basically do a excited herd dynamic. And I'm just shaking my head going, is anything else on this mountainside even remotely close to that? Because you kind of got to stop and go, okay, why is it so quiet? Mm-hmm. Is there a major predator in the area? What is going on? Why and this and that? And sometimes it even has to do with barometric pressure, which is odd as that sounds. But yeah, you're exactly right. Understanding your surroundings, paying attention to that. I mean, these are all little things that we had to learn the hard way. Sure. We didn't have access to this information. And you're exactly right. There was a lot of times that you're doing everything perfect. And then all of a sudden you're just like, why? What?
Yeah, I can remember an instance early in my career of elk hunting where I actually, and the problem with us as elk callers is sometimes we take too much pride in calling. And, this was years ago. I actually got in on a herd bull. He was standing, his cows were bedded. I got within the perimeter where he's on my left-hand side, probably 50 yards. His cows almost directly in front of me, just a little off to the right, a perfect situation. And in my young mind at that time, I'm like, oh, if I give a little cow call, he's going to come right over here. And one thing I didn't pay attention to at the time was none of his cows were talking. I wasn't a cow that had started talking moving into that group. Now, all of a sudden, there in front of me, he's off to the side. All of a sudden, this cow sounds out of nowhere in an environment that was totally quiet. And all it did was everything jumped up and just blew out of there because, it did not fit the situation. I had not taken in my environment and understood that, man, I was just like an alien coming in. I might as well have been an alien landing from Mars, and it just freaked them out.
Yeah. No, and I think kind of another myth or misconception is that you have to be perfect with your calling when you're out hunting.
That's a huge one, right?
Everything has to be perfect. And if you make a mistake or your reed squeaks or pops or this or that, you might as well just pack it in because you're done. Wrong. I have heard actual elk make some
the worst
sounds. Yeah. To me, I think what's more important is more so understanding and having the structure of what you're trying to say or what
the story you're telling, right?
Versus, the perfect pitches and note changes and this and that. And I mean, I've got some friends that, let's see, Daryl and I kind of started hunting. We grew up together. We kind of started hunting elk together, and he lives in Montana now. Mm-hmm. He still to this day uses an external reed bugle that a lot of people, if he bugled on, would laugh. But that dude has called in probably 300 or more elk in his career. And I'm not talking, little bulls. This guy has 370s, 380s, and even some 390s to his credit on his wall with an external reed bugle. So again, there's another myth. You have to use diaphragm reeds in order to be successful out there.
Right.
No, you don't, because I've got people that do it with external reed cow calls and external reed bugles every year. It's more they understand what they're saying, and they're saying the right thing in the right situation. That's the key there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Michael, this has just been tremendous, buddy. I think the conversation has been great. I think there's a lot of tips that a lot of people can take out of this. Again, hat off to you, because this is incredible free content. And we're just two guys that love to talk about elk hunting. And we could probably stay here all night. And I would actually like to do this again with you.
Oh, absolutely! I would love to come back. I know I've seen the door open a couple of times, and kind of peeking his head in a little bit. So it must be.
Yeah, I had to smile when I saw the arm coming in.
I know.
Yeah, that was it. The life of a parent, man,
it is.
Here we have all these people think that, we're talking about all this big time elk hunting, but really we're just guys, we're just fathers, we're just people that are living life that have a passion. So, I had to laugh last weekend. I was at a archery shop in La Grande, Oregon. They had an Elk Day event. They invited me over to spend the day, and Wayne Carlton was there also. And I've known Wayne a lot of years, and any chance that I get to hang out with him, and it's just awesome. But it's funny because people came over to my little booth, and they had hats and pins, and I could see that Wayne signed it, and I'm like, well, what are you doing? Well, would you sign these for us? And I'm like, can I sign it on the inside? Well, what do you mean? And I'm like, I'm really not worthy to put my name, on the same side as Wayne. I mean, what that guy has done for, no kidding,
elk calling, I'm like, I'm not worthy. And I kind of started joking with him. I said, plus, if I sign it on the inside and you wear the hat and you start sweating, then that autograph's just going to, permanently go on your forehead and for all time. Yeah, just normal guys that have a passion and a love for the outdoors and elk hunting, and also have a passion to share the knowledge and seeing others succeed.
Right. And so I want to I want to thank you, and I want to tell everybody out there that's listening. Again, I always tell you, if you have any questions, just email me, info@elkbros.com. Go check out Michael's site. Go to the Elk Calling Academy. Go to his Patreon page. He's got stuff on that as well. we hope that what we're giving you is going to give you an experience and a memory that is going to last you a lifetime. And Michael, I want to have you back. I want to thank you. And we're going to call it for this evening.
Perfect.
And buddy, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a blast. And I certainly look forward to coming back.
All right, man. Until next time, we'll see everybody. Peace.
Good night, everybody.